Okay, so this is New Troy City Walks, Historic Walk Talk, ASMR edition. It's just me, the Rack, because on Saturday night I just wanted to get out, so I did a little walk that's near to me, the Highgate walk. Before I start, I should say, we haven't mentioned this on any of the walks thus far, that we are doing walks as described in London's Hidden Walks. It's a 3-volume set published by Metro Publications and by a guy called Stephen Miller, who you may have heard us criticising on previous times. Without ever actually, I don't think we've ever praised the guy. But, well, anyway, so I did this walk near me. For various reasons, I did not arrive at the tube station. Just how you usually get there, or how he assumes you're going to start the walk. I went in the evening, later than I wanted to, only about an hour later, but that counts when it's getting darker earlier. Anyway, listen, I'll start. Highgate is one of London's most affluent suburbs, with ready access to parks and benefiting from stunning views over the capital. I'm not sure I saw too many of those on the walk. It was once owned by bishops of London, and in medieval times a road running north out of the city was built through the bishop's hunting grounds. It was the toll gate in the high part of London that gave what was once an isolated village its name. High and Gate. So he says leave the tube station via the Priory Gardens exit. This caused me some confusion, as I didn't arrive by the tube. It has, 2 exits, but in a sense 3. But because one exit you leave, and then once you're out, then there's 2 possible routes, if you see what I mean. So there was a little bit of confusion at first, but I sorted it out, although I did not ever see this first thing he talks about, which is exit via the Priory Gardens exit. If you look back carefully towards the underground station, you may get a glimpse through the foliage of a long abandoned station on an overground line operated by Great Northern Railway that ran from King's Cross via Potter's Bar to the north between 1867 and 1941. I didn't see this at all, maybe because it was dark. It was later part of a Northern Line extension known as Northern Heights that closed in 1954. So anyway, that's enough about that. So then first he took me to, he directed me to walk to number 26 Priory Gardens. This was the home of Bridget Dowling, who married Adolf Hitler's older brother Alois in 1910. She settled here with her young son William Patrick Hitler between 1930 and 1939. During this time, both Alois and William benefited from the director's patronage back in Germany. Dictator, patronage back in Germany, but William later returned to his mother in Priory Gardens before they both moved to America in 1939. During World War II, Bridget sold her inside story on life on the fringes of the Hitler family to many newspapers. It's a pretty nondescript house. Some of the houses are pretty posh. It's a pretty posh road in general, but you get some nondescript houses. So he doesn't say anything more about Alois, but I might come back to that in a different thing because I got some information about Alois and Ireland. Maybe I'm assuming that they split up. Another World War II connection to this area concerns the controversial politician and entertainer Jerry Springer. When I read this, I thought it said Jerry Sadowitz, but it's not. It's Jerry Springer, he of the chat shows, the violent chat shows. He was born at the tube station in 1944 while his mother was sheltering from a German bomb attack. Maybe the bomb attack brought it on. Return to the station and exit on the other side to reach Archery Road exit. This is just a couple of detours. I took them both. The first is a few hundred yards up Muswell Hill Road, where you find number 10, a blue plaque commemorating Peter Sellers, who lived here between 1936 and 1940. It was the first plaque placed by the Dead Comics Society as a reaction to English Heritage's blue plaque panel's perceived neglect of comedians. Also on this detour you can see Highgate Wood on your left and Queen's Wood on your right. Well, I made sure before I went out that they didn't take us through there after Greenwich's fiasco when the parks were shut. So I saw that, and then I said to a lie, I didn't take the second detour because it says that you go down the hill of Archway Road to the Boogaloo pub, and I'd passed that on my way to start the thing. I've actually been to the Boogaloo pub at number 312, a legendary music venue where Pete Doherty and Carl Barrett reunited as the Libertines, and Doherty sang with his then girlfriend Kate Moss. This has been a favourite haunt of the Pogues frontman Shane McGowan, who used to live upstairs in between drinks. Many years ago I went to the Boogaloo with a lodger and it was pretty empty, but Shane McGowan was there, and eventually near the end of the night he came over and started speaking to us. I said, my mum got me your biography. I said, oh, I've read your biography. He goes, you shouldn't have fucking bought that shit, you should have fucking nicked it. His attitude, it really got my back up. I had a couple of drinks. I said, listen, you fucking cunt, I didn't fucking buy it, my mum got it for me for Christmas, you idiot. And there was a bit of back and forth, and anyway it came to naught, and we left. So that's that. I met him a few years later, but again when he at a gig where he offered me liquid LSD, but I refused. I don't do that sort of thing anymore. Then I went up Southwood Lane and took a right onto Park Walk. This is a little confusing, but I worked it out in the end. I took Park Walk to reach North Hill. North Hill, on the other side you'll see the High Point apartment block complex. I thought Simon would have liked this. I'll tell you for why. This comprises of High Point 1 and 2, a renowned example of modernist architecture designed by the Russian emigre Berthold Lebetkin, 1901 to 90, who, if you listen to our talk about Islington, did we do that one? I'm not sure. He features in that at least twice, I think. High Point 1 was completed in 1935, with 2 following in 1938. Le Corbusier was a fan of Lebetkin's innovative design, particularly its use of reinforced concrete, and he described it as the seed of the vertical garden city. People still dream of that nowadays, don't they? It's not happened yet. you meet people with like NGOs in vertical gardens. I can also say that it featured a very bright red in certain parts, similar to the one that was in Islington, had that as well. So that's that. From the High Point complex, continued southwards down North Hill. On the opposite side, at number 92, just a few doors down from the Wrestler public house, there is a plaque remembering the brief stay of Charles Dickens. Anything for a plaque. He was here for a week. Well, he was there in 1832. At this time his father John was moving his family around to avoid as many creditors, and young Charles wrote to his friend Henry Cole that his new address was Mrs. Goodman's, next door to the old Red Lion. I'm sorry I cannot offer you a bed, because we are so pressed for room that I myself hang out at the Red Lion. Now this is a direct quote. I was thinking, did they used to say the phrase hang out back then? I was hanging out at the executions. Don't know. Maybe, possibly. Seems very modern. Dickens came back to Highgate many times during his life, and this on back to the book. And David Copperfield, thought to be his most autobiographical character, also stayed here. Several members of the writer's family, including his mother, father, and daughter Dora, are buried in Highgate West Cemetery. The Red Lion that Dickens knew was demolished in 1900 as one of 19 inns that once served what was still a fairly small village in the 19th century. This is interesting. The inns were famous for the ancient ceremony of swearing on the horns, which involved initiates having to kiss a pair of stag antlers, swearing an oath to only drink strong ale, and various other amusing rites. I wonder what they were. Those who completed the initiation were granted the freedom of Highgate and given the right to kiss the most beautiful girl in the room. Maybe that would have been a bit more further back in time. As you continue down, look out for number 17 on the right hand side. There is another plaque that recalls that A.E. Houseman, the poet and scholar, who wrote A Shropshire Lad in 1896 whilst living here. The poem begins by remembering the names of Shropshire men who died fighting for their queens, and its nostalgic tone and theme of death made it the most popular poem amongst the British troops during World War II. I had a Marine stay as a lodger. He liked Robbie Williams, but only about 2 or 3 of his songs. You soon reach Highgate High Street, at which point cross over the road. Look out for the chapel of Highgate School on the left-hand side. This looks very spooky. In the stone, not the flesh, in the stone at night. Part of the main entrance to the senior school. This served as the main place of worship in the village until the 1820s, when the authorities decided that villagers should not be worshipping in a school chapel. This led to the building of St Michael's Parish Church, which we see later on during the walk. The original free school in Highgate was founded by Sir Richard Cholmeley. That's one of those names, Cholmeley. Get me. In 1565, under the patronage of Elizabeth I, our greatest queen, the Pirate Queen. This was an era when only 5'4". This was an era when aristocrats were beginning to build mansions in the village, attracted by the clean country air and space. Today it costs around £20,000 a year to send a senior boy to Highgate School. Past pupils include the poet Sir John Betjeman. As a child he lived nearby the houses and was taught at the school during 1916 by another famous poet, T.S. Eliot. Other former pupils include film critic Barry Norman, and why not, cricketer Phil Tufnell, footballer Joe Cole, inventor Sir Clive Sinclair, whatever happened to him, composer John Tavener, and a fair number of pop stars, including Crispian Mills of Cooler Shaker, Ringo Starr's son Zach, who's been a drummer of Oasis and The Who, Johnny Borrell of Razorlight, and John Moss of Culture Club. Rock and roll has always been a middle class lark, hasn't it? I think. Ripped jeans and all the rest of it. Just over the roundabout, opposite the school, you will see the Gatehouse public house. This is located near the site of the original toll gate that was demolished in 1892, having collected road tolls since 1318. The pub is an excellent place for an early refreshment break before tackling Highgate's many hills. I didn't find there's only one hill that was really challenging, and I only had to take that because I couldn't go through the park, but the hills weren't so challenging, to be honest. I'm nearly 50, so the pub, Gatehouse pub, it's reputedly haunted by the ghost of Mother Marnes, who was robbed and murdered inside the old gate. Charles Dickens is said to have visited the previous pub on the site. The current building dates from the early 20th century. And the first cartoon to appear in Punch magazine was sketched at the pub. In medieval times, a hermit lived on the site, and his job for the bishop was to maintain the road that served as the main exit route north out of London. As part of his road building duties, he dug gravel from the ground nearby, which in turn became a pond, now the heart of Pond Square, as seen later on. Highgate's development was linked to the increasingly heavy traffic on the road, and drovers, they drive cattle, I think, farm stock, would stop in the village's many public houses to drink and rest before heading into London's Smithfield market to sell their animals. A hermit, now that is a job that I could do exceptionally well, I think. Follow the map down Highgate High Street, full of elegant shops and Georgian buildings. Number 44 was once a chemist's where poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, 1772 to 1834. That means he was around 58, 62. I don't know, 62 or something when he died. Anyway, it was once a chemist's where the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge would enter by a secret door in order to take delivery of laudanum. Coleridge, best known for the poems The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan, and whose house we visit later in the walk, was addicted to this opium derivative. He lived in Highgate with his protector, Dr. James Gilliam, and his family for many years until his death in 1834. Gilliam, a man with gills. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner? Maybe there's something else going on there. Gilliam did his best to cure Coleridge of his terrible addiction, but was unsuccessful. Somewhat incongruously, the Sharon Stone film Basic Instinct 2 features scenes shot in and around these streets in 2005. I haven't seen either of the Basic Instinct films. Follow the map along South Grove. Very soon you reach Pond Square. This is the location of the original village green, although the pond was drained in 1844. Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626, the great philosopher, lawyer, and according to conspiracy theorists, the true author of the plays attributed to Shakespeare. I was listening to podcasts about that, funnily enough, the day before I went on this walk. It was a very, very complicated story behind that. Numbers and geometry and masons and stuff. It's not the only one that they try to say that Shakespeare's plays were written by. Anyway, it says here that Bacon caught a fatal chill here after experimentally using snow that had fallen to freeze a chicken. Bacon died in 1626 in Arundel House, which stood on the site of the current Old Hall. It's seen slightly further north. Anyway, I took this opportunity to have a crafty yet a piss which I dedicated to Francis Bacon, the philosopher. Those noises are my galaxy things going off, saying I've got some message which probably doesn't mean anything. Highgate is fond of its ghosts, and it's even said the square is haunted by the ghost of Bacon's frozen chicken. I didn't see it. I'm afraid. I'm sorry to say. Or maybe I did. A frozen... Was it plucked? The one thing I saw was plucked. Anyway, the square is also the site of the Highgate Festival, normally held every June, which in recent years has been partly funded by local resident George Michael. I wonder if George Michael... Is he still... He was going through a phase of getting into accidents every weekend, wasn't he? He of Wham. Whamming his car into everything. Continue along, looking on the left for the Highgate Literary and Scientific Institution. It was founded in 1839 to encourage intellectual pursuits. Today it houses a library, special collections on Coleridge and Betjeman, regular lectures. You can join if you want to and raise your brain. Beside the institution at number 10 South Grove is Church House. This is thought to be the old brick house at Highgate on the very summit of the hill where the Steerforths live in David Copperfield. Copperfield is invited to stay and describes it as a genteel old-fashioned house, very quiet and orderly. From the windows of my room I saw all London lying in the distance like a great vapour, with here and there some lights twinkling through it. I suppose the vapour is the smoke from the factories and mist and stuff. Morton House at number 14 South Grove is nearby. It was here that Coleridge first came to live in Highgate with the Gilliam family in 1816. Originally he came to have tea with Gilliam and discuss a way he might overcome his opium addiction. Gilliam suggested the poet stay with him and his family just for a few weeks, but Coleridge never left. I've had guests like that. Not as interesting though. Not as share their opium. Don't do drugs, kids. I don't do drugs. Many of the great literary and influential figures of the day would visit Coleridge and Highgate, including Dante, John Stuart Mill, Wordsworth, Hazlitt, Robert Southey and Charles Lamb. According to Thomas Carlyle, Coleridge sat on the brow of Highgate Hill in those years, looking down on London and its smoke tumult, like a sage escaped from the inanity of life's battle. Number 16 is The Lawns, a sleek steel and glass house that was shortlisted for the 2001 Sterling Prize for Architecture. I couldn't see much of that, I seem to recall, because of grown foliage, which is kind of one of the things that make us think that this guy didn't actually do any of these walks himself, but sort of did it by Google, if you see what I mean. It won a prize, Sterling Prize for Architecture. Perhaps ironically, the owner, John Sorrell, a former chairman of the Design Council, objected to his next-door neighbour's plans to build a futuristic roof extension on his house. Sadly, the Lawns lies discreetly behind a wall and very little can be seen from the road. Well, there you go. And he says neighbour, it's not his direct neighbour. So that was a little bit confusing. The target of the complainant, film director Terry Gilliam, who's got more complaints, unjustly I feel, against him nowadays, isn't he, for his comments about various things. Me Too, etc. Film director Terry Gilliam had a little dig at the relative newcomers in a public statement, having lived in the next house up, the Old Hall, since the 1980s. In 2009, Gilliam was interviewed by the Evening Standard, and when asked about what advice would he give to a tourist visiting London, he answered, "Get the out of this town. We can't move for you. We get a lot of tourists in Highgate looking for Marx's grave." Don't take it personally, says this author. Continue west, you pass the Old Hall, the largest residence on South Grove. At the court, this gate was open actually, and a light was on, but I didn't want to push my luck. The core of which dates from 1690s, as mentioned earlier. It stands on part of the site of the long demolished Arundel House where Sir Francis Bacon died after his frozen chicken experiments. I wonder if he has seen the chicken. Gilliam. Elizabeth I visited Arundel House, and James I was entertained there with Ben Jonson's play Penate. Next door is St Michael's Church, opened for worship in 1832, and said to be that this was actually great. It looked so spooky, as stately and spooky actually, in the dark. It's said to be the highest church in London. The entrance is level with the cross on the top of St Paul's Cathedral. Coleridge was originally buried in a little graveyard at the top of the High Street by the school chapel, but his remains were brought to St Michael's in 1961, and the poet laureate John Masefield gave the address at the unveiling of the stone memorial, found in the central hall. Coleridge almost certainly worshipped at the church, high as a kite, as it was consecrated 18 months before he died. In David Copperfield, Dickens described St Michael's as the church with the slender spire that stands on top of the hill. It's fairly accurate. Opposite is the Flask, the most famous pub in Highgate. It dates from at least the 1660s, although the main structure is roughly 100 years older. The pub took its name from the flasks of Hampstead spring water that were once sold here when Hampstead was still a popular spa resort. The Flask is well known for the swearing of the horns ceremony. The poet Lord Byron swore the oath and referred to it in his poem Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. So he did it at this pub, I'm assuming. The Flask can count highwayman Dick Turpin, Coleridge, Karl Marx, and artist William Hogarth among its former customers, and is also said to be haunted by a female ghost whose presence is announced by a sudden drop in temperature. I know a few females who aren't dead whose presence seems to be announced by a sudden drop in temperature. Follow the map to enter the Grove. This contains the finest houses in the village, many dating from the late 17th century and costing around 7 to 10 million. It is also home to perhaps the highest concentration of famous pop stars and actors in London, which means then that they must go to the Flask sometimes, no? Continuing that tradition of celebrities. However, its first famous resident was Samuel Coleridge, who lived on the top floor of number 3 for the last 11 years of his life. After moving with the Gilman family from Morton House, the house was later occupied by J.B. Priestley, making this a rare property that can boast 2 commemorative plaques. It was recently purchased by Kate Moss and her husband Jamie Hintz for a reported £8 million. I can tell you that the lights were off. It didn't seem like anybody was home. Although they must have somebody that the house sits, don't they? I wondered if Kate, on dark nights when she might happen to be alone, whether she might imbibe some drug or even sober, sit and read the works of Coleridge, listen out for his ghostly wheezing and puffing and asking for a drag on her opium, but she's never spoken of it to my knowledge. Other local residents include the actors Jude Law and Sienna Miller, Sting, whose house was previously owned by Yehudi Mendoin, and George Michael. Sting's house is where, according to local folklore, Madonna met her future ex-husband, Guy Ritchie. That's witty, her future ex-husband. I can tell you that I did not see any celebrities on this walk. Follow the map down Highgate West Hill, looking out for the gates of Whittinghurst on the right-hand side. This is said to be the second largest private residence in London after Buckingham Palace. Actually, this was huge. It looked, I mean, you couldn't see much of it, but what you could see was huge. The original house was built in 1744, but was later torn down and rebuilt by the soap magnate Sir Arthur Crossfield in 1913. The Crossfield family owned the house until the early 1970s. The house was bought for $50 million in 2009, and work has been ongoing ever since. It has been but by whom? Bought by whom? Not some Epstein character, the new one, not the other ones. Not Brian Epstein. Yeah, the new one. Going around with Maxwell. The house was bought for $50 million in 2009, and work has been ongoing ever since. It has been reported that the redeveloped house will have 65 rooms, including 25 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and a walnut-panelled grand ballroom, together with a huge 2-storey subterranean extension intended to house a 70-foot swimming pool and a cinema. I mean, you must, I'm going to have 25 bedrooms full of people over this weekend. In recent years, the property has served as a location for a number of costume dramas, including Tipping the Velvet and Nicholas Nickleby. At number 40 Highgate West Hill is a building that was formerly the Fox and Crown Public House. In 1837, its landlord, James Turner, saved Queen Victoria from a potential disaster when a wheel from her carriage fell off. He doesn't tell us any more about that. Independent research. She rewarded him with a royal coat of arms for his pub. But it's now a some kind of mental health clinic. It's kind of scary, actually. Like in a Cronenbergian way. Continued out David Cronenberg, the horror film director. Continue down Highgate West Hill, looking out for because of the blandness of the sort of spring mines or something like that. It's just weird. Continue down Highgate West Hill, looking out for the childhood home of Sir John Betjeman at number 31. It was a nice little house. He later remembered his days here in his blank verse autobiography, Summoned by Bells. Safe in a world of trains and buttered toast, where things inanimate could feel and think, deeply I loved thee, 31 West Hill. At that hill's foot did London then begin, with yellow horse trams clopping past the plains. I like that line, where things inanimate could feel and think. I never, though, felt dedicated to any house in that way. From here, follow the map to descend Highgate West Hill, before turning left into Swain's Lane. Swain's Lane, I know it well. And continue eastwards. The lane dates from the 15th century at least, one of 4 old parallel pathways leading up to Highgate Village. It was also once known as Swine's Lane, and allowed access to the farms, presumably populated with pigs or swine on either side, from Swine to Swain. I should turn it back to Swine Lane, I think. No? Now this bit was interesting, because I've passed this for various reasons quite a lot. I hope my pictures, anyway. should look at the pictures. On the left, after a few minutes, you will see the entrance to the amazingly neat and ordered Holly Lodge estate. The origins of Holly Lodge date back to 1798, when Sir Henry Tempest, that's a good name, built a villa here. The land he developed included Traitor's Hill, said to be where members of the Gunpowder Plot met to watch the Palace of Westminster blow up in 1605. I'd like to get Traitor's Hill. It's not around. Is that not around anymore? The villa was named Holly Lodge, and in 1809 was leased by an actress named Harriet Mellon. She later married the banker Thomas Coutts in 1815 and enlarged the estate. When she died in 1837, she left her estate to Mr. Coutts' granddaughter, Angela Burdett Coutts, 1814 to 1906. Burdett Coutts is widely regarded as one of the most remarkable women of her age. She used her enormous wealth to help fund a vast number of philanthropic causes. She entertained the great and the good of Victorian society here, including Queen Victoria and Charles Dickens, who dedicated the novel Martin Chuzzlewit to her. She was close friends with the Duke of Wellington also. After her death, her husband put the estate on the market. In the 1920s, it's developed into the residential estate seen today. The villa was demolished, and the meadows where Burdett Coutts had once entertained her famous visitors were built over. Part of the new estate was acquired by the Lady Workers Home Co. Limited, who built accommodation for single women moving to London in order to work as secretaries and clerks in the city. Yes. Holly Lodge Estate. Now, it may have been that where I got. It's a gated community now, and many years ago, I went to a party up there. With, I don't know, fans of the Libertines. I got very bored at one point, and there was a large table. I took, while everybody was being inane, I took everything off the table carefully, put it on the side, and then very carefully turned the table upside down. I got thrown out then. I was kind of sort of noble vandalism. Nothing got damaged. Continue along on the right hand side, you'll see Holly Village. This dates from 1860 and was designed by the architect Henry Astley, Derbyshire, for Burdett Coutts. It consists of a group of 8 buildings built around a green. The house may have been intended for senior or retired workers on the estate. Now, I was interested in this because I pass this a lot and I've always wondered about it. Only a couple of pages left. It was a short walk. What is not in doubt is that this neo-Gothic fantasy is one of the very few developments of its type in London to survive. Yes, I got confused. I have photos of this. I don't have photos of the Holly Lodge estate. Seeing as a gated community, it didn't seem worth it. It's like to survive in London. The diamond-shaped Coutts coat of arms appears prominently in Portland stone on each building, and over the entrance archway is inscribed Holly Village, erected by A.G.B. Coutts, AD 1865. The sculptures on either side of the archway are of Burdett Coutts herself and her governess and longtime companion Hannah Brown. It's nice to get a statue. Derbyshire later designed some of the first flats built by another great Victorian philanthropist, George Peabody, he of Peabody Housing Association, who are pretty rubbish these days. Today, Holly Village is a private residence, so please respect the privacy notices. I was taking photos of it, and this woman looked at me strangely. Well, I was just finishing taking my photos. And then I walked away, and I was putting my new camera phone thing away, and I looked over my shoulder and she was entering, so there you go. Today Holly Village is private. Yes, I read that. Coote's Bank, whose profits helped build the village, continues to this day and is still the bank used by the Queen. There you go. God bless her. Continue north up Swines Lane. You soon reach the main... sorry, talking to myself. You soon reach the main entrance to the western and eastern sections of Highgate Cemetery. I might skip this bit because I could not enter. And everybody in Highgate Cemetery, we could do an episode on that all on its own. I couldn't go in, and I don't know that it's just a long list of people that are buried there and stuff. And about the vampire, Highgate Cemetery vampire, which everybody knows about. I'm going to skip that. Maybe do a Highgate Cemetery thing all of its own another time. Did see an interesting stone on my way past, which I will present a photo of here. This guy, they say he invented cinematography. I looked it up, and there's other few French people, but this guy does seem to be the first. I may insert a little bit of talk about him here. This photo is the memorial to William Fries Green. William Fries Green, 7th of September 1855 to the 5th of May 1921, was a prolific English inventor and professional photographer. He was known as a pioneer in the field of motion pictures, having devised a series of cameras in 1888 to 1891 and shot moving pictures with them in London. He went on to patent an early two-colour filming process in 1905. Wealth came with inventions in printing, including phototypesetting and a method of printing without ink, and from a chain of photographic studios. However, he spent it all on inventing, went bankrupt 3 times, was jailed once, and died in poverty. The memorial describes him as the inventor of kinematography, a term Fries Green never used in talking about his achievements. Indeed, he often spoke generously about other workers in the field of capturing movement. His second wife, Edith Jane, died a few months later of cancer and is buried with him, as are some of his children. I wonder if Elon Musk will follow a trajectory like this, end up dying in poverty. It's hard to imagine with billions, but maybe it will happen. Be interesting. So I'm going to skip Highgate Cemetery. Then there was Waterlog Park, which I couldn't enter, but I didn't mind because I saw, it's only got 2 things of interest in it, and then I could easily walk around it. But this did lead to the steepest hill. But that was worth it to see these 2 strange. There was a party going on in some very, very posh residence called the Grey House. I was like, they're all out on balconies, glass balconies, the rich and the famous. And then there was I assume they were the rich and the famous. Could have just been rich. And a few freeloaders. I've been a freeloader myself. And a place called Valhalla, which was interesting. Cream and red colours. Strawberries and cream. Waterlog Park. I don't know if I want to read about that. It's not particularly interesting. Oh no, it was actually. Yeah, Lauderdale House is in Waterlog Park. It was built during the reign of Elizabeth I. Charles I let his mistress Nell Gwyn live here, and according to legend, when he refused to acknowledge their illegitimate son, She threatened to drop the child from a window, to which the king reputedly responded with some dash, "Save the Earl of Burford!" The house now hosts cultural and other activities, including many music concerts, so check the website. This also has a good cafe for a nice day. I had to walk around, but here if you do it like this, then you leave and you go back down Highgate Hill, or you just go down Highgate Hill. And soon you will see the Whittington Stone at the corner with Magdala Avenue. Erected in 1821, it commemorates Sir Richard, or Dick Whittington, who, so the story goes, was sulking his way north out of London when the Bow Bells called him to turn again. He returned to London and went on to become its mayor 4 times between 1397 and 1420. In reality, Whittington was not the poor boy of pantomime lore, but the son of a wealthy Gloucestershire family. There you go. And then in Dickens' Oliver Twist, Bill Sikes passed this stone after the murder of Nancy. Bullseye! No violence, Bill, no violence. I haven't read the book and I don't recall the musical too well. Did Bill Sikes escape then? He didn't die? He made his escape, so there could be a Oliver Twist 2, Bill Sikes' Revenge. Bill Sikes could return. From here, continue down the hill through the area the estate agents refer to as Highgate Slopes. Makes it sound a bit nicer than it is. There's a grotty pub on the right. There are these horrible gutter snipes outside. Listen to that dreadful drill music. I just put my head down and scurried past. Sauntered. You don't want to show these people too much. I don't know. You can't show fear, but then you can't show bravado. Either one riles them up. If you look back up Highgate Hill, try to picture the first cable car in Europe, which ran from here to Highgate Village between 1884 and 1909, carrying people up the notorious 1 in 11, 9% climb. It's a very steep, that one. He doesn't mention landing at Archway Tube Station and the old cinema that used to be there. I saw a photo of this old cinema that used to be there the other day. It was really, really nice. A huge arch that you could shelter from the rain or even the sun under in the shade. Eating fish and chips or whatever. Having a fag. Having a little kiss with your lover or whatever. Waiting to see the movie. And that's the end of that walk. I really liked it actually. It was a lot of fun. It was a lovely evening. It was it's nice. Yeah, I'd recommend it. 4 out of 5. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye bye.